Hello friends, let's review some of the true-false questions for the Certified Payroll Professional exam. Let's begin. The responsibility for determining the employment status of an individual who performs services rests with the employer. True. An accountant who provides bookkeeping and payroll services to several local businesses and works at her own office is an independent contractor. True. Telemarketers working under the direction of a company are usually independent contractors. This is false because actually they are by law considered employees. They are statutory employees. Workers hired through a temporary help agency are not employees of the client company. True, they are the employees of the agency. Full-time life insurance salespersons are always considered statutory employees and are never subject to future taxes. This is false because their earnings must consist only of the commissions in order to be exempt from the future taxes. If it's not only commissions, then the employer has to pay future tax. And just be mindful that future tax is only paid by the employer. If the employer has a right to control what work will be done and how the work will be done, an employer-employee relationship exists under the common law test. True. If an employee resigns after working for an employer for 5 years, the employer must retain the employee's I-9 for 3 years after the employee's last day of employment. Now this statement is false because actually the employer has to retain the employee's I-9 only for 1 year after the employee's last day of work. Under the federal new hire reporting requirements, multi-state employers must report a new hire to the state in which the employee works. This is false because actually they have to report it only to one state. An IRS agent conducting an employment tax audit must give employer a written notice of the availability of Section 530 protections. This is true. An employer that changes its classification of the work from independent contractor to the employee may still claim Section 530 protection for the period before the change. This is true. Employers who claim Section 530 status for their workers because of a significant segment of their industry classifies similar workers in the same way must show that at least 50% of the industry treats these workers as independent contractor. This statement is false because actually the employers must show that only 25% of the industry treats these workers as independent contractors. Employers can demand specific documents to prove employees' eligibility to work in the United States. This statement is false because they cannot demand specific documents. The employee can pick from the list that is on the Form I-9 any documents that he has and give it to the employer. The employer cannot ask for specific documents. If the employee is rehired by the employer 75 days after being terminated, the employer must report the employee as a new hire. That is true. Part-time employees are not covered under federal payroll tax laws even if they meet the common law test for employment status, that is false, they are covered. Under the ABC test, one of the determining factors is whether the worker in question is free from control or direction in performing the work both by agreement and in reality. This is true. Technical services specialists are specifically excluded from reasonable basis test. True. Under the ABC test, one of the determining factors is whether the worker in question is free from control in direction in performing the work both in agreement and in reality. True. Length of employment makes no difference in determining the employment status. What makes a difference? The duties performed by the person. So, length of the employment does not make any difference. This statement is true. Managers and executives are excluded from the employer-employee relationship for tax purposes. False. Managers and executives, they are the employees, so there is an employer-employee relationship. If the employer uses e-verification program, the SSN in section 1 of the form does not have to be entered on I-9. This is false because they still have to fill up the form I-9 and the SSN should be written on section 1. If the independent contractor timely provides the employer with the correct taxpayer identification number, there will be no backup withholding. This is true because backup withholding is only done in case where the taxpayer identification number, that is the TIN, is incorrect. It starts with the number 9, or the employer gets a letter from the IRS that something is wrong with the TIN. The FLSA always overrides any state wage hour law. That is false. Actually, it's the opposite. The state always overrides the FLSA. The basic unit for determining the proper wages due employees is the work week. This is correct. Hospital workers are covered by the FLSA regardless of the hospital's annual volume of revenue. True. The job title is a strong factor in determining whether the employee is exempt from minimum wage and overtime provisions of the FLSA. That is wrong because it's the duties which is a strong factor in determining whether an employee is exempt from minimum wage and overtime provisions of FLSA. Employers that enter into agreement with their employees to pay them fixed weekly wage even though their hours vary from week to week are operating under fluctuating work week. True. The FLSA wages include the fair market value of the facilities such as the boarding and lodging. True. The FLSA requires overtime pay at 1.5 times the employee's regular hourly rate of pay. True. The FLSA requires overtime pay of the hours worked on Sunday. This is false because the FLSA requires overtime pay for hours worked over 40. Does not matter if it's Sunday or a weekday or a weekend. Employers are required by the FLSA to give rest periods to employees. No, they are not required, not under the federal level. Time spent by employees during bona fide meal periods is considered working time. False. The mom and pop shops whose employees are immediate family members are excluded from the coverage under FLSA. That is true. If it's only the immediate family members, they are excluded. FLSA requires employers to pay employees for hours not worked because of illness. False. Only required to pay the employees for the hours they have worked. FLSA does not require an employee's preliminary or post-preliminary activities to be counted as timed work. It is true. The FLSA does not require that an employee's preliminary and post-preliminary activities be counted as time work. That is true. FLSA is commonly known as Federal Wage Hours Law, correct? To determine the gross earnings, the total overtime earnings are subtracted from the total regular earnings. This is wrong because actually they are added. The overtime earnings, which are calculated at the overtime rate, and the regular earnings that are calculated at the regular rate, they are added together and to determine the gross earnings. Exempt employees do not have to be paid the required minimum wage or overtime payments. True. The Portal to Portal Act of 1947 generally states that the travel time spent commuting from home to work and work to home is not considered compensable work time. True. Taxi cab drivers are exempt from minimum wage and overtime wage requirements of the FLSA. False. If they are employees and they are working under some employer, then they are covered under the FLSA. Wages other than cash are included in the minimum wage calculations if they primarily benefit the employer. This is false because even if there are fringe benefits or other things, they are included into the minimum wage calculation because they are taxable. The FLSA requires employers to pay tipped employees a cash wage of at least 2.13 per hour. This is correct. For the purpose of determining whether the minimum wage has been paid, services charges automatically added to the customer's bills are classified as tips. It is false. This is all in this video. Hope it will help you in your exam, and keep watching for my next video. There will be more questions coming up. Thank you.